My guest this week is a battle-hardened warrior in more than one sense. Not only has he served 3 tours of Iraq as a military intelligence officer with qualifications in Arabic language and culture, but he's also a fierce campaigner in the culture wars. Bernard has been politically active for years in many different conservative parties, and it was in one such party that we first met and became friends. Bernard Gaynor is a conservative Catholic who is anything but politically correct. There is no fascistic boundary he's not prepared to crash through. It's not that he's fearless, it's more that he is so deeply concerned about preserving our free society from the constant attacks from the left that he is not prepared to be silent or sidelined by that fear. The weapons aimed at him are no longer AK-47 assault rifles, but farcical laws and overreaching judiciaries seeking social regimentation, forcible suppression of opinion, and a tendency towards strong autocratic control. His story is not only interesting, but a cautionary tale for those unaware of the clear and present assault to traditional Australian freedoms. Welcome, Bernard.
Thanks for having me on your show.
Tell me about how you first got interested in politics.
Well, look, I've always been interested in politics, but when I left school, I joined the Army and I served for about 12 years full-time. I left the Army in about 2012, and that was to get involved in minor party politics, to assist a friend of mine, Aidan McClendon, launch the Queensland Party, which eventually merged with Katter's Australian Party. That's why I left full-time service, but I remained in the reserves.
Okay, so did you leave the Army to get involved in politics because you have to get involved in politics? How do the regulations work?
Sure, so full-time members are entitled to join political parties, make political statements, express political opinions. Understandably, they just can't do it in uniform. They can't give the impression that they're speaking on behalf of the military. But because I wanted to get involved with the Queensland Party in a big way, I became the secretary and we launched the party. I wanted to devote my full-time to that, which is why I left military service. How
did your political activity come to the attention of and the annoyance of your chain of command?
Sure, well, my involvement in political activity was not a problem for the Army. They didn't care that I left, they didn't care that I left to join a political party and launch it, they didn't care that I remained in the Army Reserve because I obeyed all the rules, and I always have obeyed all the rules. What they cared about was a statement I made at the start of 2013. By that stage I was with Katter's Australian Party. I was the National General Secretary of his party. I was concerned about 2 things when I made this statement. One, Bob Katter was indicating that he was going to run pro-gay marriage candidates, even though the party constitution and its membership were opposed to homosexual marriage. And 2, the federal Labor government at that time was proposing new anti-discrimination laws which would have removed the rights from private schools to discriminate against teachers on the grounds of their sexuality. And as a parent, I wanted the freedom to be able to send my children to a Catholic school. I was very concerned about that. So I made a statement. It was that I would not allow homosexuals to teach my children, and I was not afraid to say it. I made it on Twitter. It caused this huge uproar, and it achieved what I wanted it to achieve with Katter's Australian Party. But my commanding officer called me, as a reservist. He called me into his office, sat me down, told me that that statement was unacceptable, could not be repeated, become a matter of interest for the Chief of Army, and that I could not be involved in political activity if I wanted to remain in the reserves. That's what he told me. It was a direct violation of defence policy, which said very clearly I could, provided I didn't stand up in uniform and make political statements.
Okay, and so what happened? What happened after that? How did that?
Sure. So this was in late January, early February 2013. I didn't say anything actually. I was considering my options. I was quite.
You thought about it?
I was quite. Look, I've had a good career in the Army. I've never been, as an officer, counselled for breaking any laws or for failing in my responsibilities, and so it was quite.
You're actually well decorated, aren't you?
Well, I've got a military. I've got the US military. Meritorious Service Medal and some Australian decorations.
Give those out frequently?
Well, not really, no. But so I was quite upset about what had happened. But what really made me see red was 6 weeks after I was told that I could not participate in any political activity, even though Defence Policy said I could. The Army, Navy and Air Force marched in uniform at the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras with the Labor Party.
Now, the
with
Gay and
Greens.
Lesbian Mardi Gras isn't just a celebration. They actually promote themselves as a political protest,
Sure.
don't they?
So in the constitution of the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras, they make it very clear that they are a political organisation. They run events to run political agendas, to develop political activists. It is political. And when you've got the Labor Party, the Greens, the left wing of the Liberal Party, people calling for Corey Bernardi to be, basically thrown out of politics, it's political. And Defence was marching in it in uniform. I saw red.
There's no hiding the fact that they openly vilify Christianity.
Oh, absolutely. So you have men dressed up as nuns, mocking the Catholic Church, for instance. You've had Fred Nile, the Member of Parliament in New South Wales, very famously one year, they marched down Oxford Street with his head on a plate, a make-up of his head on a plate. They vehemently anti-Christian and in the most mocking fashion possible. Yes.
Which is fine, freedom of speech.
Well,
but
sorry,
for the Army to participate and by extension endorse that political agenda.
Sure. So I made some complaints about this through the internal Defence channels, and I pointed out that Defence has a policy, one, that says you can't participate in a political event in uniform. Defence has a policy that says you can't allow religious vilification in a Defence workplace. And the Defence workplace is any place where people are in uniform. So the Mardi Gras is a Defence workplace.
Under orders.
Under orders, that's right. I pointed out the religious vilification at the Mardi Gras. Defence also has a policy on unacceptable behaviour, including sexual behaviour or behaviour of a sexual nature in a Defence workplace. And I pointed out that all these policies were violated by this. I pointed out, for instance, that they were marching with an organisation that on its webpage had the secret colour code people should wear to signify an interest in pederasty and pedophilia. They were marching with that group, and they claim it was a cultural event. That's the culture they were marching with. My complaints went on deaf ears. A homosexual officer who marched at the Mardi Gras shortly afterwards went on TV in uniform to criticise the entire hierarchy of Defence policy and to outline what policies he thinks he should have been changed. So,
a short aside, I want to come back to your relationship with the Defence Force hierarchy and how that has come out and where we're up to so far. But did you bring the fact that the Australian Defence Force was campaigning against Australian laws and culture and breaking its own regulations? Did you bring that fact to the attention of any politicians?
Yes, I did.
What did the politicians what did they have to say?
Well, look, I brought it to a local member who you know quite well. He told me that there wasn't much he could do about it. Just was not interested in prosecuting.
What about the Minister for Defence?
I brought it to the attention of the Minister for Defence, who was Kevin Andrews. At that time, who I thought might have been interested. He passed it on to the Assistant Minister for Defence, who was Stuart Robert at that time.
Right.
Stuart Robert said that Defence has to be, like I pointed out the information, for instance, about that organisation they marched with. His response was Defence has to be accepting of all views. That's what his response was.
By participating in campaigns against Christians?
Yeah. In fact, his staffer said that because there was a royal commission into the Catholic Church, I had no right to bring this. I had no leg to stand on in raising these issues. That's what his staffer told me.
So the political response from the Liberal Party was underwhelming? Not interested?
Not only were they not interested, they were vehemently opposed to any idea of removing Defence from the Mardi Gras.
Okay. So tell me, what is the problem with the Australian Defence Force campaigning against Australian laws?
Sure. Well, the Australian Defence Force exists to protect Australia and its laws and its people. There is an inherent contradiction in having a military organisation that campaigns against the government. That is unsustainable, it is dangerous, it cannot work. We have crossed a very important line in this nation. We now have the government allowing the military to march on the streets against its own policies. It's very dangerous.
This sounds to me like an abdication of all sensible logic in the name of political correctness.
That's exactly
what they're
it is.
actually just afraid of being called mean names.
Okay, so the word homophobia gets thrown around a lot. I actually think there is a thing called homophobia. The people who are homophobic are those who are so afraid of the rainbow backlash that they will not stand up to them, even to the point of allowing our nation's laws to be trampled. They will not stand up to them. They are the homophobic ones.
Tell me how the military brass responded to your complaints about their participation in political campaigning 6 weeks after they told you they were against military political campaigning.
I put the evidence in that the Mardi Gras was political. That was never formally investigated. They just refused to investigate it. Instead, they hit me with 12 military charges. They hit me with a high-level administrative inquiry. I was told by my commanding officer, his boss, the Deputy Chief of Army, the Chief of Army and the Chief of Defence Force that I should resign. And eventually they terminated my appointment as an officer.
So your career and conduct were, what's the right word, microscopically audited by the military inquiries with 12 different charges and accusations laid against you.
Yep.
How did that come out?
Well, I'm very pleased that every single investigation found in my favour. Not one charge stuck.
So how did they proceed with terminating
Not
you?
one inquiry made an adverse finding against me. The Chief of Defence Force went ahead anyway. He said, even though everything, he acknowledged that that was the case, he said, in my opinion, you've still broken the law and I'm going to terminate your appointment.
Okay.
So I took him to court, and the federal court found that it was he who had actually broken the law. And this is an important point.
The federal court, yes?
The federal court found the Chief of Defence Force was the one who broken the law. He acted, he breached our nation's constitutional freedom of political communication by terminating my appointment. And I think this is the key point. All these anti-discrimination laws, all these anti-discrimination bodies, the policies that are implemented as a result of them in big business and government, time and time again, the courts, when these laws are challenged, are finding that they are unconstitutional.
Tell me about your interactions with Malcolm McGregor.
Sure. So Malcolm McGregor, who calls himself Kate now, was a transgender speechwriter for the Chief of Army at the time all this was happening. And interestingly, he is the only officer in this whole saga who Defence did find breached this anti-discrimination policies, because he went and made public statements that my father and I had failure in our DNA, and he made some other comments about that.
Lovely.
And they're the kind of comments you'd expect from a man who thinks he's a woman. Anyway, he was found to have breached Defence's anti-discrimination policies, and Defence, instead of charging him, which should have happened, decided instead to pay $25,000 to my father, which Dad very generously allowed me to use for my legal fees to fight the Chief of Defence Force.
So what punitive action happened with Malcolm/Kate?
He was promoted and transferred to the Air Force.
So found, investigated, charged, investigated, found guilty, promoted.
Yes.
Charged 12 times, investigated, cleared of all charges, and punished.
Yeah, so Malcolm McGregor was never charged.
Okay.
He was never charged.
Just investigated.
Investigated administratively, found to have breached Defence policy, then promoted, and eventually became Queenslander of the Year, and his boss became Australian of the Year. It's
a very politically correct story, which is the campaign you're fighting.
Well, it is a story of political correctness. I mean, it is a celebration of the politically correct elites in Australia. It is a celebration of their promotion by the media, etc., despite the fact courts have made findings that they've acted unlawfully. It is a celebration of the fact that someone who represents conservative views can be unlawfully drummed out of service for no reason whatsoever. It's a celebration of what political correctness is. That's the story, yes.
I think there's many veterans who are rightfully concerned with the lack of attention and regard that they're given from the hierarchy and the government, whether it be veteran pensions or disability allowances or this kind of flagrant unthankfulness. You've left your family and gone for months on end 3 times to Iraq, fighting for our freedom, fighting for other people's freedom. You come back here and you're kicked out of the army ungracefully because you have a political opinion that's different to the hierarchy but consistent with the laws of the land.
That's exactly right. So the hierarchy is politicised now, and it's so politicised it's now changed the policy on political activity to one where you can't participate in political events unless the hierarchy decide that that's an agenda worth pursuing, which itself, I believe, would be found unconstitutional if challenged. The military commanders have no legal power to determine what political events and what political causes defence members can and can't support in their private capacity as citizens.
It's horrific that the Defence Force is being turned against Australian citizens instead of against our enemies.
Most people inside the Army, Navy and Air Force are doing a very good job there.
Absolutely. This is only the hierarchy.
The hierarchy have become politicised. They're pursuing their own career ambitions. They are essentially climbing the greasy pole to the top, and in order to do that, they're pleasing the politicians along the way. And the whole fundamental separation of military power from democratic power is now undermined as a result.
When did this all change? When did the Australian Defence Force, Army, whichever branch, when did they become more political and less serving in the background?
Look, there's an old story. There's always politics in everything, and I think you'd be naive not to think that. But I think since 1992, when the ban on homosexuals serving the military was overturned, there's been a gradual increase in the political correctness, I suppose, of the hierarchy. And the key points that will go down as a day of shame in Australia's military history was the day they marched in a political event at the Mardi Gras. That was simply unacceptable. So that was in March 2013.
That is a watershed moment. It's not a small change. It's really the switch from non-political Defence Force to actively, proudly, officially, unapologetically political.
That's correct.
It's a big change.